Welcome to Cartonize 2025. This is an all-day virtual event featuring Packyard-enabled partners. We could not be more excited, very excited about the turnout already for the keynote today. There's some brief product demos kind of sprinkled throughout the day, but the major theme is analysis and unique perspectives on some of the most important topics facing fulfillment operations today. Some quick housekeeping, and then I'll get out of the way and our keynote speaker can begin. The session will be recorded. Like all sessions today, you'll get a link to watch it on demand if you want, 24 hours after we wrap. Please submit a question in the questions box you see on your screen. We have a lot of experts talking today, but we also have a lot of experts in the audience. So Cartonize 2025 will be a success if it's more of a conversation. So please engage there. You can even just add, tap that reaction button as the speakers are talking to engage that way as well. At the end of this session and every session, there'll be a bright pink pop-up that lets you go automatically to the next session, or you can browse through all the day's sessions to see which of them may fit into your schedule today. Without further ado, we are very lucky to have Nabil Malouli giving today's keynote. He's the SVP of eCommerce and returns at DHL, and someone that every time I've spoken to him, I learned something new. So without further ado, Nabil, please come to the stage and take it away.
Thank you, James. It's a pleasure to be here at Cartonize and opening the day. Thank you, James, and the entire Packrate team for the opportunity. Welcome, everybody. What we're going to start the day with, you're going to have a lot of content today, more specific and more detailed and more technical. So what we're going to start the day with is really like a big view on the overall supply chain, what's happening in the market, what do we see in terms of evolution. And I'm going to focus really on three elements. We're going to talk about a bit the overall worldwide context. Obviously, one of the big topics right now is tariffs. And the impact of that. We're going to talk about some of the mega trends that we've seen also evolving, but continue to be really important around all the dynamics we have in supply chain. And we'll talk about some of the elements that are going to be continuing to be important and what is coming next in our industry, in our very exciting industry. Let's start with really this very volatile and very dynamic environment that we are all living in today. I want to think at this point that, this is just the new normal, right? I mean, we had COVID, we thought after COVID things would get better. Then we had recessions, Fed recessions, then we had inflation, there are wars going on, unfortunately, that are also impacting some of the trade lanes and routes across the globe, particularly around sea freight as an example. But we also have market dynamics around nearshoring. We have the rise of AI. We have the continuous rise of commerce and digital commerce. And we have also all the volatility related to the tariffs, specifically with the changes that have been happening in Washington related to increases of tariffs. I'm going to touch a bit around that. So I think between all these elements, I think the key message is, I think we are living in a new pace. And this space is simply something that is every time impacting supply chain. And we are at the core of helping actually companies. Everybody that is working or is probably joining this call or will listen to this content is involved directly or indirectly in helping companies or helping their own companies to navigate all these challenges and all these changes. So I think we just have to get used to that because this seems to be really the new normal. And I don't think doesn't look like it's going to get much better in the short term because many of the changes will imply some supply chain changes. So let's go a bit on some of the topics. So first, if we think about like the tariffs and the implication here. So tariffs is right now dominating the conversation across supply chain. I mean, if you look at how many times it's being mentioned in investor calls or even across media, it's really dominating the conversation, obviously because of the importance of the US market for most of the economies in terms of like trading partner. And that is not only specific to retail or to e-commerce, but it's really relevant for absolutely every industry that you can think of, from engineering, manufacturing, life science, and so on. I think the good news this week, at least, or the better news maybe, is that there are some positive progress, and I think two very important progress that we've seen in the last 7 days has been definitely the trade deal with the UK, which sent a very good signal that ultimately the administration is really pursuing that goal of that, increasing, but what I will define as levels that could allow still trade to happen. And also, obviously, the big news was earlier this week on Monday, the agreement to pause, the 145% tariffs on China and reduce that to 30%. No mention there around the de minimis amount yet, and the clarity around that, if that's going to be also changed or evolve in this negotiation. I will imagine it will change as well, because that's, I think, something that's very important also on the Chinese outbound side into the US. But I think the good news here is that there's progress. We went from a very critical situation in terms of like volume between China and the US. I'm going to talk a bit about some of the impacts we see, and hopefully things continue to go into a negotiation mode where we see levels which I will define as levels where trade can happen, right? Is 30% enough? Is it high enough? These are obviously very complicated questions, different opinions around this. I believe in global trade. I think this is good for the industry. I think it's good generally for countries, but they need to be some parameters to make sure that countries also can actually thrive within this environment. What we've seen in the market since the Liberation Day related to tariff is really a mix of decision-making process and companies taking different directions. We've seen the wait and see, so companies really pausing their freight movements and waiting to see what are the negotiation outcome going to be to take decisions. I think this is something that obviously is not possible for every company to do that, but companies that do have, for example, inventory into destination countries, or that they had already inventory localized, they can probably wait a couple of weeks or eventually a month or two if they have enough inventory. And that's something that we've seen pretty common being done. And we can expect that now that the numbers have gone down, or that there are some trade deals like the one in the UK that are actually moving along, we can probably expect some of these companies to restart, really shipping from that perspective. The obvious number there around the wait and see is the huge drop we saw on ocean freight inbound into the US. There's different numbers there coming from shipping lines and from different companies, but give or take, a drop of 40%, after the announcement of the very high tariffs. That is very meaningful, and that could mean in the next couple of weeks or next couple of months, some products not being on the shelf as well. The other thing that we've seen is companies simply adjusting pricing, increasing their price. Some of them made it public, some of them have not made it public yet, or how they're going to deploy this. But the consensus, I think, is we haven't seen any company in the market saying that they're going to absorb this, right? And so the result of the expectation should be that at the end of the day, consumers are going to pay for this, because these companies are going to pass on at least part of it into the final prices. Post deliveries and front load deliveries also have been something that we've seen happening. Some of the companies have done some pre-buy, or they have pushed ahead inventory in order to reach the destination countries before the tariffs went into application. And then last but not least, we've seen a shift for companies that could do that had enough supplier base and shifted production, or also shifted mode of transportation, in order to obviously reduce cost, but also to look for some of the markets maybe where they can produce or source some of the goods that they're importing that have either a preferential tariff situation already as of today, or where the outlook of the negotiation seems to be more promising. Again, that's not given to any company. You need a certain scale, you need to have a network of partners, and you need also to have like sourcing, manufacturing sites that are already available, that have capacity, and that can supply these products for the company. So this is, I think, at a very high level, what we are seeing. Some of the solutions, this is not an exhaustive list, but some of the solutions that we've seen also companies using in order to minimize the impact of the cost of the tariffs is things like duty drawback or free trade zone or bonded warehouses that allow you to either delay the payment of these tariffs until you really need the goods, or eventually delay them at least until there is a better outlook in terms of what will be the application of tariffs when goods get nationalized in the US. Another thing, for example, that we do at DHL is the consolidation. I mean, we have a service that is called Breakbulk Express. It's the consolidation of volume, basically parcel volumes, in order to avoid having to pay multiple custom clearance for different parcel units, and you basically bundle them as a batch, and that allow you to minimize cost in terms of customs clearance processing, and that's a better way to move parcels if you're going to have to process hundreds, thousands of parcels, as an example. So again, this is not an exhaustive list. There are different also ideas that can be put in place, but ultimately the scenarios that I presented of what companies are doing and some of these solutions are what we have to think about and what we have to work with our customers and your customers and also the companies that we serve. Another thing that I just want to highlight a bit is the tariffs is obviously a critical element that is really into the moment today. But if we look at the broader market, what has been, at least in my opinion, the biggest change across supply chain in terms of how supply chains have evolved is the evolution of commerce. And that is why I want to highlight this point, because if we think about digital commerce as a whole, you can think about that as probably the most disruptive element in the last 10 years in regards to, of course, the rise of e-commerce brought a lot of transformation of network, of warehouses, of last mile delivery, of cross-border, of parcel lockers, of gig economy model. So there's multiple things there that we can think of when we think about like the evolution from traditional commerce to mobile, online commerce, and now social commerce. And there is obviously the next wave, which is really the wave where we have a lot more AI applications, ML applications within the commerce environment, which will also very likely trigger some new dynamics, potentially new players, potentially new model of buying, potentially better insights around forecasting and demand. So this is going to continue to evolve. And I'm going to talk a bit more into e-commerce as one of the major trend and where we stand. So this is just to give you a bit of an overview of that evolution and what I think is the next wave, which is really about intelligent commerce. We are right now in the middle of social commerce, I think, as a business model that is really taking off. And then I think we're going to see more applications of intelligent commerce. So let's talk about the 5 mega trends that we see in the market. Global trade will continue. I'll touch a bit about that. E-commerce will continue to rise. Climate change will continue to be important, even if maybe this has been maybe some of the things that we've seen in the market recently, maybe taking a bit less presence in the conversation. But it is really something that we see in the long run being critical. Digitalization is definitely critical for all the businesses, the adoption of technology. I'm going to give a couple of examples. And then the evolving workforce. And what you see in the slide around the tick boxes are really all the areas where packaging and solutions like pack rate are critical enablers, and they can contribute to this different mega trend in a meaningful manner, right? We'll touch, and you're going to get some examples through the day. But I think when you think about like, how do you actually address more digitalization? How do you address better packaging for climate change, as an example, or optimize the packaging? Or how do you serve better the growth of commerce via digital commerce? I think that's areas that pack rate is definitely one of the software solutions that is in the packaging space, critical for improving these areas. Let's talk a bit more into detail. So global trade. Of course, global trade right now is a topic that people might say, yeah, global trade is gonna lose steam, or we're gonna see, a more localization of inventory and manufacturing and so on. I think that's potentially possible, but at the end of the day, I like the statement trade is like water; it will flow, right? And there is a high level of specialization around certain categories of manufacturing that will take years, if not decades, to really localize in certain markets. And so I personally think that we're going to continue to see global trade being a major element of how we do business and so on. Even if there is tariffs that are being implemented, for example, in the US, I think if they are in a reasonable manner, we should be able to work around it, and we should be able to actually manage that in a pretty well a manner, right? There might be a bit of inflation, there might be a bit of price increases, but I think I think the market will adjust, and I think we're going to see that continue to be important. What we see is our global trade to continue to grow in line with GDP growth. It's a bit lower than what we've seen in the last couple of years because there is multiple countries and multiple regions across the world that want to bring more manufacturing in either in the country or nearshoring in order to minimize some of the geopolitical risks, some of the supply chain disruption risks that we've seen in the last couple of years. So I think it is clear that there is an intent to diversify supply chains, to nearshore, but it is not that simple. And for people that have worked in manufacturing or that have gone to some of these very large manufacturing sites in China, in Vietnam, in Mexico, or in some of these mega manufacturing hubs, you can see that moving that type of skills, moving that type of knowledge is not easy to do, and it's not going to be something that's going to happen overnight. It will take years, if not decades, for this to happen. The other thing is e-commerce. So obviously, I have a bit of a bias view on this because I'm a huge promoter of e-commerce, and I think e-commerce is again the most disruptive force that we've seen in the last 10 years. And I'm going to show you a statistic in a minute. It's predicted to continue to be that in the coming years and decade. But if you think about e-commerce penetration, it's actually still relatively low, right? Like even in mature market like the US or in developed economies, give or take, the retail penetration of online sales is somewhere between 16 to 25. Even if you just compare this to China, the penetration is much higher and it's already above, the 45%. But there is also not only the retail space, then you have other industries, the automotive industry, the life science industry, where there is also a lot of digitalization happening. And these industries have a much, much lower rate of penetration, where I think we can expect this to continue to be very, very important for businesses, and we can expect this to continue to grow, even in developed economy. I don't think at all that this is a saturated market. I think new generation coming into the workforce are going to also influence this in a meaningful manner. And I think the rise of technologies and the continuous rise of AI deployment and the rise of digitalization overall will also boost and continue to boost e-commerce. So I think, by the way, this is not only an opinion. You can look at any statistics from from consultant research companies and so on. There's not a single company that is showing a decrease or a reverse trend around e-commerce, right? So, and that is at least for the next decade. So I think this is going to continue to evolve, very dynamic. Especially the application of AI in this space can be very, very meaningful in regards to how this evolves in the next 5 years. But it is here to stay and it's going to continue to grow. And the statistic I wanted to share on that is there was a recent report from McKinsey that was identifying basically what are the biggest areas of business for the next couple of years and going into 2040. And here we are not talking about impact as social impact. We're really talking about like revenue generated impact. And if you look at this, so you have a list here, you cannot see that well into the slide, but in 2040, e-commerce is expected to be between 14 to 20 trillion of business. That is massive, right? I mean, today, depending on which statistic you look at, we are around, somewhere between 6, 7, but this is going to continue to grow. And even if you compare this to AI applications or software, which come number 2 in what is going to create the highest amount of value, AI application software are estimated to be like a 4 trillion, right? And so, this is pretty much like a 5x the number. and that means it's very promising, and it's going to continue to grow. So I think my message here is this is an area of growth. It's an area of importance for businesses, and I think you should all think about like how do you focus and continue to develop solutions, because I don't think we have also operationally reached level of maturity where we could say, yeah, this is actually a model or a channel that we can support very effectively across all the areas. The following point is around digitalization. So digitalization has different, of course, meaning and applications depending on the business, software, hardware, robotics, automation. But it is very clear that digitalization of workflows, of processes, the application of automation across warehouses, the applications of new technology in the delivery space. I personally live in Miami. In the city center, we have sidewalk bots, autonomous sidewalk bots. I was in San Francisco not so long ago. For the ones that have been recently, I mean, autonomous vehicle is absolutely normal, right? I mean, you have like a company like Waymo that is doing 250,000 rides per week autonomously. So this is coming. There was a recent also announcement from Aurora around truck. So autonomous trucking. So these technologies that we've been talking about for a long time are also starting to come into the market in a real application. And I know some people might think like, well, we've been talking about this for 10 years. It didn't happen. It's very unlikely it's going to happen. I understand that point of view, but I also feel very different about this. I think, yes, I think many of the timeline or many of the statement around, how quick we could get this type of application was probably very optimistic, but ultimately this is coming and it's going to continue to come. I'm going to just give you like two public announcements that were made just to give you a sense as an example. I mean, one is from this week, so it's, it's timely, but, we just signed an MOU, for example, at DHL with Boston Dynamics to deploy the Stretch robot solution, which is an unloading a robot that allow you basically to unload loose cartons from a truck or from a container in a fully autonomous manner. And we also have, started to scale the work that we were doing already with partners in the likes of companies like Locus, where you start to see the numbers, and they start to be really meaningful numbers in terms of applications, deployment. And again, I do think that we are still very early into the journey. I think the industry is still very early. And again, these are examples on the maybe more on the hardware plus software side. But when you think about like digitalization and processes and technology that be applied, again, software solutions in the packaging space for on-demand packaging, for optimizing packaging in the likes of pack rates are the type of solutions also that are being deployed across the board in the entire digitalization wave that is happening right now. Just one comment around the humanoid and the AI application, right? So you see that obviously there's a lot of noise in the market. We oftentimes internally speak about focus on where really the industry is going as opposed to focusing on the noise. There's a lot of noise around AI and there's a lot of noise around humanoids, for example, when it comes to digitalization. I think if you look at this slide and you see the amount of companies already developing this type of technology, it's quite impressive, right? From many places across the globe. Ultimately, I think for our business and for our industry, the most important is the use case. Is the use case and the application and the return on investment. So ultimately, if it's a humanoid, if it's a robot on wheel, if it's a robotic arm that is mobile, and so on, I don't think that there is a meaningful difference in the supply chain application ultimately, as long as you can actually achieve the use cases, right? But the point here was more around like, there's a lot of technology that get deployed. I think for businesses, it's really important to focus on the areas that will be meaningful to yours and make sure that you address these ones, because sometimes people lose attention on the shiny stuff and actually focus on where the money is, right? And that's why, for example, an area like packaging is very relevant. Around technology, I do love this quote, and so I just wanted to share it. I have two quotes that I love that I think are very interesting and very thought-provoking for us to think about. So Jensen Huang, a CEO of NVIDIA, says AI agent can't do 100% of any jobs today, but they will do 50% of everybody's job, right? So when you think about this in terms of like technology, I think this is not only a valid statement for AI, but it's probably a valid statement for a lot of the technology that we are deploying. So rather than thinking, hey, can this technology actually help me to solve 100% of my problem? Rather think about like, hey, can this technology help me to improve like an 80%, and then keep maybe that 20%, still in the way that you do it, or maybe it's not fully optimized. But if it can take you, and to optimize a large part of it, I think it's actually worth it to really investigate and go deeper on it. I'm gonna jump because I want to keep some time on if there's Q&As, but just quickly on the evolving workforce, two statements. Obviously today we have 6th generation of consumers and we have 6th generation of employees to manage, and that represents certain challenges with the new workforce coming into the labor pool with different expectations and different wishes and different abilities when it comes to digital interfaces. Anecdotally, when you bring somebody that is just starting to work, and if you put them into a null WMS interface or a null TMS interface, the first reaction is like, what is this, right? The type of anecdotal situation like this matters not only because they are funny stories or maybe they are relevant stories, but also because they show how the industry has to evolve also to be able to attract talent and continue to bring more and more people into the industry, which we still need. Because even with all the technology, if you look at this graph, you see that the actual workforce, as an example, in a place like the US, has continued to increase, right? And so even if we've deployed a lot more technology, a lot more robotics in the last couple of years, the workforce has increased because the volume has increased, the complexity has increased, and so on. Just to close on what's next, I love this statement also from Bezos that says, people ask me always about what is next, what's going to happen, what's going to change, and so on, but they never ask me what is not going to change, right? And since we are talking about the future, I wanted to put like a very pragmatic thought here to kick off the day, which is at the end of the day, most of the businesses and most of the clients will want things to cost less. They will want the quality and the speed to be right. And they will want to have a faster service eventually. And they will want more and more sustainability within that. So I think when you think about like these dimensions again, and you think about like what you're going to hear through the day today around pack rate and some of the technologies that are being deployed and some of the partnerships, I think you really want to think about what are the type of technologies that you can actually deploy, that focus on this. And for us, for example, within DHL, also we are very geared toward this around how do we make sure that whatever we deploy actually serve this purpose, and it serve this purpose ideally in multiple dimensions, not only in a single dimension. Because if I can improve cost, but obviously lower the service, well, is that really worth it to pursue, right? You really want to be looking at aggregated areas and not give up on any of this. And I think technology today is a key enabler of being able to do that in a meaningful manner and at scale. And I think, again, we are in a very, very early stage of the journey, which is, I think, very, very exciting. So we're almost on time. I'm just going to check here to see if we got like some Q&A.
Hey, Nabil, I'm back.
Yes.
I saw a couple of questions come in, but we asked you to describe the entire state of the world at a high level. So I think we ran out of time. So we'll have to engage with those questions directly, you and the Pack team over email. Thank you so much for that. That was the perfect, I think, way to kick off today. Just really, really high level touching on all these things. And to your point, throughout the day, we'll see very specific applications of a lot of the themes you mentioned. So thank you so much, Nabil, for joining us for Cartonize.
Yeah, no, absolutely, James. A pleasure. I'll be here listening also into the other speakers. So I see you later, guys. Thank you for joining us, and looking forward to a great day today. Thank you, James.
Perfect.
Thank you, James.
Thanks, Nabil. All right, if you're joining the next session, there should be a link. Just click on it, and you can join automatically. Thanks, everybody.